Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shawn Heinrichs.
Thank you. And I don't use podiums and I don't write speeches. First of all, thank you so much to the Green Sports Alliance. I have a background in sports for many years. I was a NCAA athlete. I was a college wrestler. And so for me, my roots are embedded in this community. And then I was a professional racer, a mountain bike racer for many years. And so, I understand the language of sports. I understand how people who are in really engaged in sports understand what it takes to build a community, bring a team together, and solve problems. And maybe it's winning a professional race, maybe it's winning a title match, whatever it is. It takes a lot of dedication, and it takes a lot of people to gather around, even if it's just one athlete. There's a whole community behind them to make things happen. But today I'm going to talk about a different race. And this race is one of probably the most pressing and important races we've ever faced. The film is called Racing Extinction. It's directed by Louis Sahoyas. He directed the movie The Cove, which is, I think, the most decorated documentary in history. And the reason for that is Louis knows how to tell a great story on really important issues. The issue we're facing now, though, is probably the biggest in our lifetime. It is the sixth great extinction. It's called the Anthropocene, which is the extinction driven by man. What it means is right now, right this very moment, we are losing species at 100 times the rate ever before in history. Think about that. We went through 5 major extinctions, comets hitting the planet, mass obliteration, and right now, just because of man, we're losing species at 100 times that rate. In our lifetimes, we're going to see massive changes if we don't change things. For example, right now they're predicting the complete collapse of all fisheries in the oceans by 2048. 2048. That means everyone in this room, most of you will be here to witness it. Your children sure as hell will be here to witness it. And what happens, and why is that important to people who live here in Chicago or live across the US? 2 billion people, 2 out of 7, depend on the oceans as their primary source of protein. Over 500 million people depend on the oceans as their primary employment. So what happens when 2 billion people go hungry and 500 million people lose their jobs? What is the result? Well, look at what's happening around the world with wars and terrorism. Do you know what the number one candidate for a terrorist or a militia person is? Poverty. We are seeding the future generation of violence and destruction by our very actions this very moment. And I'm sure most of the people in this room really like the ability as Americans to have a passport, to live this lifestyle and really enjoy it. What happens when you have 2 billion people looking for another place to have a home? Suddenly, nations no longer become places of freedom. They become walled cities where you can't leave safely. And lifestyles where right now most of our products are being produced in China and our produce is coming from Mexico. All these products are coming to the country right now. What happens when they're not coming here anymore? Suddenly this lifestyle that we all really, really enjoy is gone. And it's not in 100 years, it's not in 50 years, it's in 10 or 15 or 20 years. And if you really think about it, it's not an if, it is a certainty if we don't change what we're doing now. And how do I know that? And I'm going to give you some hard facts. Right now, we are consuming at a rate of 2 planets worth. Very simply put, it would take 2 Earths to sustain our given rate of consumption without any population growth. Now consider this. If the average person in China consumed at the average American's rate, global consumption would increase by 2.4 times. 2.4 times. That means 4.5 planets. 4.5 planets to support this population. What's the US's number one export? Standard of living. Everybody wants our standard of living. What that means is we're not only not fighting it, we, all of us in this room are in some ways fueling it. And so when I say to you, this is going to happen if we don't change our actions, it is a fact. It is a certainty. It's not an if. Now here's another reason why it affects us. Take one breath. Take a second breath. That second breath came from the oceans. Plankton, phytoplankton in the ocean produces the oxygen. It absorbs carbon, reduces, and produces oxygen. In the last 30 years, we've lost 40% of our plankton. It's not an if. We're literally collapsing the lungs of this planet this very moment, which means even the air we breathe right now is at risk. And as our friend here, Prince E, just pointed out, the other half of the oxygen is coming from our trees, and we're cutting down, what, 40 football fields every minute? So on both ends, we're squeezing the life out of this planet. So why does it matter to everyone in this room? Well, I think just on what I said, just this moment, I think it matters to every one of you, whether it's your lifestyle, whether it's your children, whether you just love the ability to go out on the planet and explore. If those things matter to you, if oxygen matters to you, it's important to you. But the good news is the race isn't over. You see change happening, and there's a couple of vehicles that I believe are some of the most important and powerful change agents on this planet. And I list those in 3 categories. One of them is music. Everywhere I go in the world, whether it be in Vietnam or Indonesia or South America, you hear similar songs being listened to. Music is a universal language. Spoken word and music, very powerful. A second one is art. And in my work, because I can't sing, and I'm not a spoken word artist, I use art, filmmaking and photography, because again, anywhere in the world where you show that image of connection with the oceans or with a polar bear or in the forest, people can relate and connect to that image. And so art is a very powerful tool, and filmmaking is part of that art. Well, there's another vehicle that probably is as big, if not bigger than all of them. It's sports. I can't go to a single country, in a single town, a restaurant, a home, where there isn't some game playing at any time of day or any time of night. It is the place where all differences get put aside during the Olympics. And suddenly all the nations of the world rally and come together to celebrate sport. It's one of those things that are native to human beings, like music, song, and like art. And so why does it matter to this room, and why is it relevant? Because you people, this community, you guys are some of the most powerful and influential players in that business. What he said. Love it. Yeah, let's put our hands up, right? This is our community. And I came from the sports community, and I love sports. It's been a part of what drove me. If you watch the film Racing Extinction, we go to some really crazy places, we go undercover, and we have to face some of the hardest things you could ever see. Well, I learned that in the arena. I learned that wrestling in some of the most difficult and challenging matches of my life. I learned how to stand up for something and defeat it. And so what I think about when I think of this community is, you guys have a channel to the world. You don't reach thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Your work reaches billions of people. So what if we were to turn that message and start injecting into that message conservation messaging that was inspiring, that brought that community into actually turning things around and making a difference? What if suddenly during every game, the mascot was an icon of conservation, and that the message was from those pro athletes and that football players that I am part of that change. I stand with Prince E for the trees. I stand for the oceans. I'm one of those people. Everybody watching that game that's running around, and I'm in Indonesia a lot and other countries, they're all wearing the jerseys. They would all want to be that guy or that woman. So if we could harness the power of this community and inject that messaging, instead of sitting here in 2050 with concrete walls around our country, eating dried food and never being able to travel because of violence that's now extended throughout all the countries, we'd be celebrating a completely different future. And like our friend here, I don't accept that reality. I accept that we have a chance to make a change. And what I would love to do is ask everyone in this room to join that community, join us. And if we could just for one moment decide, you know what, today we turn it around, maybe we can make that difference together. Thank you.